In 10.4, we're moving on to the word secant. So secant can be abbreviated into just SEC. So secant of theta or secant of any degree in the unit circle, it's going to be 1 over cosine. Now you might think it's 1 over sine because they both start with s, however they are opposite. So secant is 1 divided by cosine. So using this identity, we're going to find the secant of every angle. And again, you can practice these on your own. So starting with 45 degrees. So 45 degrees, we can go ahead and look at our left hand, put down our middle finger, and it's square root 2 over 2 comma square root 2 over 2. Secant is 1 over cosine. So we're going to always be looking at the very first of the ordered pairs. So secant, we're going to go ahead and put 1 divided by square root 2 over 2. So we're going to keep the top and we're going to flip the bottom. And we cannot leave it like this. So we cannot leave that root in the denominator. So I'm going to multiply the top by root 2 and the bottom by root 2. So we have 2 square root 2 divided by root 2 times root 2 is 2. Those go ahead and cancel. So we're just left with square root 2 is our answer. So everything that references 45 degrees, secant of 45 degrees will always be square root 2. Positive and negative changes depending on the quadrant that you're in, but they're always going to be root 2. Next, we're going to take a look at secant of 30 degrees. So secant of 30 degrees, looking at your left hand, put down your 30-degree finger. So we have square root 3 over 2 comma 1 over 2. And again, we're taking a look at the cosine. Secant goes with cosine. So we have 1 divided by square root 3 over 2. Change division into multiplication by keeping the top and flipping the bottom. We're going to have to rationalize the denominator, so I'm going to multiply the top by square root 3 and the bottom by square root 3. So in the numerator, we have 2 times root 3, which is just 2 square root 3, divided by root 3 times root 3 is 3. Nothing can be canceled, so this is my final answer. So secant of 30 degrees, and any degree that references 30 degrees, is always going to be 2 root 3 over 3. Finally, we have secant of 60 degrees. 60 degrees, on our 60-degree finger, on our left hand, so we have 1 over 2, comma, square root 3 over 2. Again, secant, 1 over cosine. So I'm looking at that 1/2. So I'm going to put 1 divided by 1/2. We're going to keep the top, flip the bottom, and it changes to multiplication. And this can just reduce. 1 times 2 over 1, or 1 times 2 is just 2. Okay, so anything that references 60 degrees is always going to be 2 for secant. Let's take a look at secant of 0 degrees. So 0 degrees right here. So my ordered pair is 1 comma 0. Again, we're taking a look at cosine. So we're going to put 1 over 1. And therefore my answer is 1. Let's keep going with just the ones on the axes because we've already solved the other ones. So let's see. 90, that's up here. So we have 0 comma 1. Again, cosines. We have 1 over cosine, which is 0. So we have 1 over 0, which is undefined. Another one on the axes, that's 180 degrees. Let's take a look. It's over there. So we have negative 1 comma 0. So I'm going to put 1 over cosine, which is negative 1. 1 over negative 1 is equal to negative 1. 270 degrees. Let's take a look. On the axes, so we have 0 comma negative 1. So we're going to put 1 over cosine. And again, it's always 1 over cosine. And we get undefined. I believe that's it for the axes. You can go through all of these and take do it based off of the reference angle. So secant of 45 degrees, I know that it's always going to be root 2. So it's anything that ends in a 5. So number 10 ends in a 5, number 13 ends in a 5, and number 14 also ends in a 5. So all of these are going to be root 2. However, depending on the quadrant, it changes. So secant of 315, that's in this quadrant. So we have positive, negative, and because it's 1 over cosine, you're looking at only the cosine, so that one's going to be positive. Secant of 225, that's in the third quadrant with negative, negative. So we have a positive divided by a negative, so therefore we're going to have negative root 2. And then secant of 135, it's negative, positive. So we have to look at the cosine. So we have 1 divided by a negative number, which is going to be a negative. See, you can go through it like this, or you can actually do the math. So let's see. Let's go through all of the 30 degrees as our reference angles. So 30 degrees, it's closest to the x-axis. So that'd be 150, 210, and 330. So again, 150, 210, and 330. Where is 330? Okay. So secant of 210, I know that that is in the third quadrant. So we have negative, negative, negative root 3 over 2, comma, negative 1 over 2. So we have 1 over a negative root 3 over 2, which is going to be a negative number. So we have negative 2 root 3 over 3. Secant of 150 degrees, that's going to be, 150 is in the second quadrant. So we have negative root 3 over 2, comma, positive 1 over 2. We have 1 over a negative number, negative root 3 over 2. So we're going to end up with a negative answer again. And then finally, number 16. So secant of 330. 330 is in the fourth quadrant. So it's going to be a positive, comma, negative. So we're going to put 1 over that positive cosine. And we're going to get a positive 2 square root 3 over 3. And finally, last but not least, everything that goes with secant of 60 degrees. So 60 degrees is our reference angle. That's 120, 300, and 240. Depending on the quadrant, depends on the positive or negative. So secant of 120, that's in the second quadrant. We have negative, positive. We have negative 1/2, comma, positive square root 3 over 2. So we have 1 divided by negative 1/2. That's going to give me a negative number. Again, we already did the math in number 3. Let's go again, secant of 300. That's in the fourth quadrant. Positive, negative. We have positive 1/2, comma, negative square root 3 over 2. We have 1 over positive 1/2. Again, we already did the math. That's going to be a positive number. And then last but not least, secant of 240. 240 is in the third quadrant. So we have negative 1/2, comma, negative square root 3 over 2. So we have 1 over negative 1/2. And we get negative 2. Again, we already did the math in that number 3. And those are all of the answers. So this is the entire unit circle and all of my answers for secant of the different degrees.